Hello, Darklings. So I wanted to try a new kind of video series type of thing, which are director spotlights or favorite directors that I have that I want everybody to be aware of so you can enjoy their awesomeness. One of my all-time favorite directors who absolutely cannot go wrong, in my opinion, is Guillermo del Toro. So born in October of 1964, he's a Mexican filmmaker. A good portion of his movies are in English, and a good portion are also in Spanish. So he was raised by his very, very Catholic grandmother, and so there's a lot of Catholic imagery in his films. And he took an interest in horror and special effects makeup at an early age, and ended up learning special effects makeup from the legendary Dick Smith when he was a teenager. And he had this dream project, which later ended up being his first movie. And in order to get it financed and to prove that he really could get away with doing this thing, he ended up working on a TV show in the late 80s called Hora Mercada. Since I'm not good at Spanish, I probably butchered that a little bit. And that kind of like proved his worth as a filmmaker and kind of started building up a lot of what ended up being stylistic key points for him. And his first movie, which is amazing and one of my favorite like weird takes on the vampire genre, is Cronos, which involves bugs, which he has an obsession with, and this older gentleman, and was the beginning of his lifelong friendship with Ron Perlman. So this movie came out in 1994. It was one of the most expensive films ever made in Mexico. I think it's still pretty far up there on that list, and it's really good. And if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. It gave him enough positive attention that he was able to do another movie, also prominently featuring bugs, which is Mimic. And this movie is kind of a hot mess, but it's also pretty good if you watch the director's cut and if you're willing to deal with it, and if you have any fondness for giant people-sized cockroaches inside of New York subways, which is pretty terrifying. But it's kind of a fun one. The original cut that they ended up going with was kind of rubbish and was sort of sabotaging his career a little early, but the director's cut, after years of redoing and redoing, it finally did succeed. Um, he's very heavily influenced by Ridley Scott. He really is a big fan of Alien and Blade Runner, and so you can kind of see that influence in his films as well. His next movie was The Devil's Backbone, which is all in Spanish, set in an orphanage in Spain in the 1940s. And it's a ghost story, and it's really cool and really well done, and often skipped over. And I do really suggest checking that one out as well. His next one is kind of a weird one, and you'd think that he didn't do it unless you paid attention, and that's Blade 2. Now, I like Blade 1 and Blade 2 for different reasons, because a black half vampire who's as badass as Wesley Snipes is always going to be awesome. Plus, Ron Perlman is in it, again, as an added bonus. And that movie is very weird, but you can kind of see his footprints all over it. The next one that he did, which I always, always love, is Hellboy, again with Ron Perlman. He already was friends with Mike Mignola, who did the Hellboy comic series, and they both agree that Ron Perlman would make the perfect Hellboy. The first movie is fun. It's not as good as the second visually. The storyline is a little bit stronger and it gets more interesting towards the end, but for the most part, there's only one main creature, which is Samael, and it's not really as much fun. But the second one's an adventure. But between the first and second one, he did one of the most amazing films ever, Pan's Labyrinth, which I have a giant poster of in my room. And I keep resisting the urge to get the fawn tattooed on me, or getting eyes in the center of my palms. But Doug Jones was the only English-speaking actor in that. Again, Spanish, went through a film festival route. It had a consistent problem where too many people were bringing their kids to this movie, and it's not really kid-friendly. It's pretty dark. It's set during World War II in Spain, and it's a little girl who finds out that she's a princess and shit is happening all around her. And it's a modern-ish fairy tale, and it's very well structured. I appreciate that it takes a lot from traditional European folklore on fairies, which is always really cool, and I always love it when that shows up in film, because it means someone did their research. So Pan's Labyrinth is amazing, and it's worth the subtitles if you haven't seen it, I promise. And then, after that, he directed Hellboy 2, and there's some amazing things in this movie. The elven twins, Nuada and Nuala, are pretty awesome. The troll market, that entire sequence is great. The amount of detail that he puts into his stuff and the fact that a grand majority are puppets and practical effects makeup as opposed to just CGI, that makes me really happy as a puppet nerd. And then the next one that he directed is kind of odd because some people are just like, what? And that would be Pacific Rim. I really need to rewatch this movie so I can't give an accurate critique on it because I've only seen it once and didn't pay the closest of attention. But the monsters in it are totally him. Totally him. His character dynamics, especially putting a lot of focus on young children and odd main characters, is definitely something he would do. But it's pretty badass and I need to watch it again. But giant robots fighting giant sea monsters is always a fun thing to witness. The next one that he directed that I'm super, super excited when it comes out is Crimson Peak, because it looks like everything I love. It's a gothic horror. Oh my god, it's everything. I'm so excited for it to come out. I'll have to give a review when that does come out in a few months. But if you think that there are things missing off this list, that's because he was a producer, not a director, of things like Splice, The Orphanage, Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, Mama, and Book of Life, and The Strain. So The Strain, he was a producer because he co-wrote the book with Chuck Hogan. It's a trilogy. I haven't read them yet, but I did watch the first season of The Strain, and I really appreciate that a lot of the vampire lore he uses is very much Eastern European, very specific to like the Ukraine, and he uses the original terminology of the Strigoi, and goes back to a lot of the original ideas of the stinger as opposed to fangs, which is more similar to the Greek Lamia idea. I'm also a vampire research nerd person. I love that his main themes include vampires and fairy tales, which I'm all for that shit. I live for that shit. It's like the best thing. Plus, he's also a big Lovecraft nerd. Look who I got tattooed last week. I'll talk about that more some other time. He's a big Lovecraft nerd, and I really, really appreciate that. If you want to learn more about him, sure, you can go on the internet. A big winner is Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. Sorry, there's weird noises. And this is his notebooks with his handwriting and his drawings, snippets of his house, like the Samael skull that's in his library with all these Hellboy sketches. Now, this notebook's kind of legendary because he left it in the back of a cab and he thought he'd never see it again, and then the cabbie, a few months later, was able to finally contact him. Here's some examples of his drawings. I really love it when directors can draw. It's one of the reasons I like Alfred Hitchcock. But directors who draw just have a distinct advantage because they can more clearly get across what they want. This is from Cronos. I fucking love this. It's so cool. Anyway, this is an amazing thing, and I really want to get a chance to properly go through it. I've only gotten a chance to skim, but it has a lot of like snippets of his house, which I swear it's like the new Acker Mansion. To those who are a little confused by what that means, Forrest Ackerman ran Famous Monsters magazine, and he was known for collecting horror memorabilia starting in the 1920s, and just filling his house with it for years and years and years, and he'd have people come and do tours of it, which was really cool, and Forrest Ackerman was everybody's secret best friend. So it's like Guillermo del Toro is the new Forrest Ackerman with this super amazing house. Look at that. With the Samael statue and the giant Frankenstein monster. The fact that he also loves classic horror basically means that he needs to be my best friend. He has a life-size Lovecraft statue in his library. How cool is that? So you can get this off of Amazon. Anyway, to those who are not previously familiar with Guillermo del Toro, watch everything, because it's awesome. Till next time, Darklings.